I guess it's probably you want to, that's
Recorded now.
probably a better statement.
Still a piece of paper.
All right, so we have a quorum, so we'll call the meeting to order. It is 16:02 on Tuesday, September 24th. Thank you very much. So, my apologies for not being at the last meeting. Going out of town, just everything personally blew up and everything needed attention. And by the time I looked at my watch, it was like 6 o'clock. Damn it. There's something I forgot. So since I was not there, I did have a chance to meet with Ed yesterday and get caught up on some of the conversation that I missed. Some of that we can go over tonight, because you weren't there either.
Correct.
You guys were there?
I was not there.
You were not there. So you were there.
It was.
So it was you and Ed. Chief and Chief.
Yeah.
All right.
I told you, lots of decisions were made. We're good.
Other two.
There were other different. So. So we met with Emily yesterday. Ed and I asked her for a bunch of information, numbers, whatnot. Are you able to put any of that on the screen or?
Sure, let me see if I can. I don't know if it'll let me log into my Microsoft Office while I'm in a different Microsoft Office. I will try.
So she put together a nice little graphics about this one's age projections. As we expected, we're getting older. Not younger. So age projections for the state of New Hampshire compared to Enfield. Calls per month, which, as happens with EMS, there are definite outliers. Like this last January, for some reason, was twice as many EMS calls as the previous 2 years in January. It was more calls in January this year than any other month this year. Which normally January, according to this, is one of the slower months. But maybe step forward. We'll be able to get that up there.
It's security.
What do you, since you were here last week, what do you have to share from last week?
Not a whole lot. It was a pretty casual conversation. We talked a little bit about the merits of rethinking the way that we do EMS into maybe not doing so much transportation, but perhaps cross-training the police in order to be, medical first responders, whether a fast walk makes sense versus a transporting ambulance, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But it was some kind of just batting some ideas around.
Coming from an EMS background, my hesitation to removing capability is inevitably something's going to happen, whether it's a storm, whether it's flooding, whether it's whatever, where you need that capability. And whereas I can understand not expanding the capability if the infrastructure, equipment, licensure, everything is already in place. I would be very hesitant to be reducing that. Emergency services, by definition, is not there to plan for the daily occurrences. They're there to plan for the oh shit. Sorry, we're being recorded, pardon my language. So, and I'm sure the chiefs, that's a big part of what they do, is so that way when the unthinkable happens, there's people that are ready, willing, and capable taking care of it, or at least helping everyone else manage through it. I can follow that from the financial side of things.
I don't know how much financial, I mean, but you're still gonna pay your fast squad people to respond.
Right, but you would be paying them to respond to the call, and only paying them for like a half hour or 40 minutes or there and back, instead of having to pay them to transport all the way to the hospital if we're already paying, Lebanon to do it.
Do they not have a minimum mandatory call out time?
Well, aside from the pay, you may get more people involved if the commitment is less, right? You know, if I know that I'm gonna go on a call and it's gonna be an hour, 2 hours, it's not gonna be 6.
Mhm.
I'm gonna take someone to the hospital, blah, blah, blah. You know, now maybe as a volunteer, I may be more inclined to get involved. So, and again, we were just batting ideas.
Yeah.
Nobody but say, I think there's merits to both models, and I know towns that operate under those different models, and it's worth talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I may take that idea and I may come back with, I'll say, a twist. Instead of, or in lieu of removing potentially capability, adding options. So that, okay, you know that you need to go to work and you need to leave for work in an hour and a half. You know, this call went out, you want to help out. You know, it's gonna take 15, 20 minutes for Lev to get there. You are 5 minutes down the road from the squad building. Being able to go down there and maybe have just a secondary quick response vehicle. So that way you can run down, grab that, go to the house, start providing assistance as an EMT. And maybe you get there and it's one of those cases where the person's like, I'm not going to the hospital. They called, I'm not going, blah, blah, blah. And okay, great, we can cancel. Or it is something really serious. And by having you there in that quick response vehicle quicker than it takes Lev to get there, potentially working side by side with Roy's people to help neighbors, could make a big difference. Kind of giving the volunteer that flexibility of, yes, I still want to help. No, I don't have the 2-3 hours that I can commit to taking all the way to the hospital right now. So instead of not doing anything, that might give another option.
Yep.
Again, not trying to dismiss or anything, just
No, again, we were just batting
throwing ideas back.
Yeah.
So looks like Ed was successful with his fight with technology today.
Ended up,
I'll let you go.
I haven't even looked at it.
Oh, we haven't, so let's look at these numbers together. So a lot of the numbers that we had discussed or asked about over the course of the last meetings, Emily was able to put together into a bunch of charts for us. Looks like this one, is the median age of residents, projected age of residents in the state of New Hampshire. Looks like that's coming from the state of New Hampshire census.
Hey, can you increase the size for those of us that are beyond the median age?
What do you got those on? What do you got them on?
Yeah. I try to fool myself every now and then, think I don't need them.
I don't know.
So I'll just go ahead. So what we're looking at here is that you've got population. So the green area is ages 15 to 64. The blue area is 65 to 84, and the orange area is 85 and above. Okay. So we're looking at 2020, 25, 2030, 2035, 40, 45, and 15, going left to right. All right. That looks like it's from the state. Clearly the green bar, the youngest population, is getting smaller. Looks like it gets smaller and then levels out at approximately 60% of that. 20% of the next highest age group, which is 65 to 84, and then about 6 to 7% 85 and older. In 2022, taking that, the average age or the median age of residents in New Hampshire is 43.2 as of last year. Second highest in the country.
And look at that number.
And then you compare that state number of 43.4 as the median age to us here in Enfield, 52.2. So our median age is 10 years older than the national average, or than the state average, which is already the second highest in the country. So we have, not just in the state, significantly higher percentage of more experienced people. But here in Enfield, we have an even higher percentage than the state. So unfortunately, that equates to more frequent EMS calls. Yes, you do have the younger populations that are doing the less than intelligent ideas, and the more risky activities that we do here all year round. Summertime, they're doing all the boating stuff and the motorcycles are out and whatnot. In the winter time, we've got the snowmobiles out, and skiing accidents and all that kind of stuff. So that's just it showing in comparison. All right. In 22, the median age for ambulance calls was 62.
So one of the things we talked about at one point was, what's the inflection point that we need to add police officers? What's the inflection point that we need to add more people in the ambulance? And we've thrown some numbers out that are average for the country. But this would suggest to me that we have another factor we need to take into consideration. So this saying is just when we go from 4,000 people in town to 5,000, that's when we probably need 2 more police officers. We might need to adjust that and say, well, because of our difference in age to the national average and certainly to the state average, if we get up to 4,500 and we're median age 52, maybe that's the flip that we need to, we need to be a little bit more aggressive with the thinking.
Slightly different numbers than this. Since the last meeting I was at, I reached out to a couple of previous chiefs that I've worked with over the years, who have made the transition from paid per call to some level of career department. Most of them are like 6 to 6, Monday to Friday kind of thing. And then allowing for paid staff to be there for special events, to cover the towns. That way the volunteers can go and do the special event and PR and that kind of stuff. And the consensus from them seemed to be somewhere between, once the squad hit between 1 3/4 and 2 calls per day, was where it made financial sense, and the cost benefit analysis was such that it made sense to bring that in-house. If you are less than 1 3/4 call per day on a yearly basis across the year, then it didn't make financial sense to hire staff full-time for you to do everything, and it made more financial sense to ship it out. So the cost versus benefit wasn't there yet.
But I think it's
That was full-time.
That was full-time, 6 to 6, Monday to Friday, just for the ambulance.
We still have covered, we need, that situation would require cover in the evening.
Correct. So it's the nights and weekends, which is what the squad currently covers. And then during the day is the part that right now is contracted out to City of Lebanon. And right now, well, I know she's got the numbers. There it is. 2023, we had 361 calls for service. Looks like of those calls, 61% of them were during the Lebanon coverage hours. So between 6A and 6B.
Yeah. Understood.
We can get you guys these.
Yeah,
Like I said, we
we
just
can get
got
you all
it.
these.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's why I didn't see it earlier. So was watching for it. The rest of them are either, looks like 39% of them are either early in the morning or in the evening outside of the Lebanon coverage hours.
If you guys wanna write it down, I didn't bring it, but we did the math yesterday, and that 1 3/4 calls per day was 638. And we just kind of batted the idea, we might wanna set a threshold to start the discussion about 600 calls a day. To be a little bit below the threshold of where you need it, but when we're hitting about 600 a day, we should probably start talking about whether we wanna add some personnel or not. So that's maybe one of the thresholds you guys wanna look at, or we could even go a little higher if you wanted, but that was just what we talked about yesterday.
One of the things that we have asked is how often are we taking patients to the hospital? It looks like based on the numbers, Enfield is transporting for half of the calls that they go out for. They're transporting half of those to the hospital. The rest of them are either, no transport was needed, you get on scene and nothing found or canceled. You get on scene and, patient's like, no, I'm fine, or no, I'm not paying for the ambulance, I'm driving myself.
I don't have much anymore. You don't hear that much anymore.
As versus, looks like the city, like maybe because it's the time of day, because it's daylight hours, maybe, I don't know why the difference, but it's almost 70% of the city calls they do end up transporting.
So that's 139 calls based on those numbers that were non-transport,
Combined both of them.
combined both. If we were talking about the crossover training that we were talking about and not responding, if I just use a straight number, it's not gonna be exactly this. The 68 calls, which is 31%, 11 in non-transports would equal about $24,000.
So one of the things that I don't know how it would look dispatching wise, but what he just mentioned was if someone could come up with a way,
So
whether it's cross training.
yeah, so I've talked with our dispatch about this, because we've been batting this idea around for a little while. And so what would happen would be right now I have 2 officers that are like EMT certified, right? Our goal would be to get to 80-90%, EMT certified. But, so right now, during the day, right, 6 AM to 6 PM, any med call that comes in, it's automatically dispatched to Lebanon. Our dispatch we would be able to transfer to do would be, say, Alpha, Bravo, or Charlie call. Have you guys been through like kind of an education on what the different level of calls? So Alpha, Bravo, Charlie level calls, which are like you're not feeling well, I'm not, maybe I have a bloody nose. It's, the non-life threatening calls. Instead of going through directly to Lebanon, would still go to Hanover, which they would dispatch the officer who's EMT certified, who would go there, make the assessment, and then tell them, roll the ambulance, hold in place till I make a little bit better assessment, and then be able to either say, yeah, go ahead and send the ambulance or not. And our average response time, through the day is 3 to 8 minutes, right? So we're not talking a huge delay.
Are you talking EMS people making that call?
We're talking,
Not an officer.
we're talking an officer who's EMT certified.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Like Kate,
Yes.
yeah,
Our goal would be to
who's
get
not a rookie.
every road officer.
Yes.
EMT certified, I'm not sending Cortland who has, who
He
doesn't
has
have
no
any
interest.
EMT thing, but our goal would be to have everybody EMT
Right.
certified.
Yeah.
Be able to make that call. Again, we're not talking echo and Delta level calls, right?
Lebanon comes no matter what.
Right. We're talking that, I venture to say, and I'm just going off of mine, and Richard can back me up here if I'm going off to say from my 23 years of experience with the town, that 39% of those calls during the day are those, I've had the flu for 2 or 3 days. I really don't feel well. My daughter told me I had to call, or their daughter called when she's hung up the phone. I ain't going to the hospital. See you later. I'm not, and there are less now than they used to be, but that is still roughly 39% of the calls. I can't tell you how many times I go to a call and the minute I get there, you know,
I'm not going to.
Martha say, I ain't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, let me cancel Lebanon because I want to be responsible to them and.
Yeah.
They got other calls to go. So anyway, that was kind of one of the ideas that we've been floating around for a little over a year
Yeah.
that I think. One, I believe it's a force multiplier in the fact that if we have a mass casualty event. I got all these EMT basic certified officers, right? School shooting, propane tank explodes and there's 12 injured people, right? That's a huge force multiplier on that. Then on the flip side, we're talking potentially saving the town $20,000 to $30,000 a year. And because that could also go for the, over that 6 PM to 6 AM calls for Alpha Bravo Charlie calls. Especially when we're short staffed on those call-outs.
The other thing we talked about there was doing some sort of incentive bonus for those officers to respond out off duty, working with the ambulance to do it, which will help bolster our numbers on the ambulance. And
Which Kayla does,
so,
thank goodness.
yeah. But if we could get,
We incentivize
we
it.
get all of our road officers trained
Oh, yeah.
and helping and working, then
You said
just made our-
$30,000 and you're spending $5.
then
With
or
all the-
10.
Yeah.
You know, if they could take home an extra few $1,000s, it helps retention. I mean, there's so many benefits that you start.
Well, if you spend the same money, but you're spending it on people in Enfield rather than sending it to Lebanon, it's a good deal.
Yeah.
Like,
That's it.
even like Ed, and I'll, cause I'm hoping actually comes out of this committee, we can start maybe moving this forward if everybody thinks it's a good idea. But say we incentivize an officer gets certified, maintains a certification and responds to X number of calls outside of their regular duty, they get a $2,500 a year stipend. Right? If we get 5 officers that do that, right, you're talking $7,500. If I did my math in my head real quick. 10 grand, yeah, I should, 12,000.
Yeah,
10 to 12 grand out of that, right? So let's drop it to 2 grand. It's an easy math. 10 grand, right? That's 10,000, let's say 30. The taxpayer's still saving 20 and get the force multiplier of 5 more EMT certified people to help in a mass casualty event.
The force multiplier, you're decreasing time till the first trained person gets on scene, so the public is going to see that as, hey, we're getting help faster when we need it. The officers, they're helping more, so that just makes them feel good. They're getting a little bonus in their pay,
we talked
which
about that.
makes them feel good to hire morale of officers and to happier citizens.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday. We do have officers now, they respond. And some of them have told me, I don't feel great when I get there, and I'm like, okay, the ambulance will be here in 5 minutes, and they stand there and look at the people for 5 minutes until the ambulance gets there. Then one, it doesn't make the people feel good that help arrived, oh no, help didn't arrive, we're waiting. So if they could go in and they could actually be doing something, taking the assessment and doing this, the citizens are and feel like they're getting better care.
You're
And the
confident
officers
90%
are
of
standing.
your officers would want to do.
I think we incentivize it, 90% of my officers will want to do it. Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I've talked to all of them individually. And I mean, like I said, I have 1 or 2 I got 1 that's EMT certified, I got 1 that's firefighter level 1 certified. And talking to the other officers, they were like, oh, if there's gonna be cash involved in this, and they, also get that, that's one of the things we've talked about too, is that, we all carry an AED, we're all CPR, advanced CPR, and first aid certified. So if I show up to a heart attack, right, really that's, we all carry tourniquets, right? So I carry somebody's missing a limb, great, I can jump right into action then. I show up to a stroke victim, or I show up to even just somebody who doesn't know, they just generally don't feel well. I stand there for 5 minutes to 15 minutes waiting for the ambulance to get there. where we could pull out that clipboard that makes everybody feel like something's actually happening, right? You start filling out.
Believe me, that's important.
Oh, I'm sure, right? We've talked about this,
Yeah.
right? I go through that clipboard, fill out the name, fill out that, take the blood pressure,
Do they have
take the
allergies?
pulse, take the allergies, and then when the
Yeah,
ambulance
great.
walks in, I go, here you go. That just saved
That is a big help.
5 to 15 minutes of, they can just go, we gotta go, let's
Yeah.
go, you know what I mean, that's. And again, now, that, you know, just in talking to my officers, they're like, talk about not, you know, there's no worse feeling than standing there when somebody just feels like dog doo-doo.
And we've been doing
Going.
it more often, Roy, like Matt, here, Matt, why don't you,
Yeah.
he's got very good handwriting.
And that's, but that's, you know,
Yeah.
Is there policing that's not getting done if these guys are doing?
no, policing comes first,
Okay,
right? So, but this is, now again, we're talking Alpha Bravo Charlie calls. Those aren't the policing calls, right? A Delta Echo call, shots fired, you know, stab, you know,
Yeah.
victims, so like that. Police, you know, life-saving is gonna come first, right?
Yeah.
But then they're gonna have to, you know, do their policing, you know, dealing with that, right? We can't show up to a scene where there's been a stabbing and the suspect is still there.
Yeah.
And be like, whoa, hold on, let me,
Yeah, we won't be there.
First,
yeah, let me put a tourniquet on, right? You know, there's that. So the,
Outside of that policing, I mean, they're already responding to those calls and stuff anyway,
Right.
coming around town. I think it's a level of service.
yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. I just want to make sure.
That's a good question.
Kind of look at, yeah.
yeah,
yeah, no, it's a good question. And it's gonna come up to people like, well, wait a minute, what if there's a car crash and there's our first responsibility is law enforcement.
Yeah.
You know, but then it becomes, then we, and we triage, you know, funny, we think the same terms, we triage everything, right? You know, when we get to a scene, it's, okay, what do I need to address first, right? Life-saving measures, police work, you know, this and that. And so that, you know, the main focus of this program would be those Alpha Bravo Charlie level calls. Where we don't necessarily need to send an ambulance till we know we need an ambulance, you know, versus that call, everybody's coming anyway. And so, you know, the Delta level calls, ambulance is coming, whether it's Lebanon or Enfield. Our job is police work. We're community policing, you know, my philosophy in law enforcement is community policing, and so I just don't believe that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday or 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, when a med call comes in, I should, you know, and an officer's on, that we should be like, that's not my problem, you know, it's not when we do have some life-saving
You know,
skills.
subscribe to the ABCs.
No, those days are used to, way back when, but, no, we go to all med calls that are, you know, that we can help out.
I appreciate that.
Would this have any impact on recruiting? Pro or con?
Well, I think both, right? I think more pro than con. There are gonna be some people that are like, oh, and we're not gonna make people,
Yeah, I don't want to get my returns, but.
we're not gonna make people get EMT certified if they wanna be a police officer in town, right? Hey, you got no interest in doing it? That's fine. Then don't do it. You know, you just won't, you know, if they're the only person on that day, then all calls will have to go through that. You know what I mean? But, most people, you incentivize it. There's kind of a, you know, there's that extra money that they can put in their pocket and stuff like that. And even equally to that is, especially when you get an officer who gets just a couple years on the job and they've been to half a dozen med calls and they're like, yeah, I really felt useless. What can I do to help? They do, you know, we bring officers into town that want to do community policing, not want to be big city, you know,
Okay.
yeah, door kickers. So,
And
I'm just
I'll
starting.
just do this before we go. That was 2023.
Yeah.
I'll throw 2024 up there. We're on this, pretty
So
much
this
the
is-
same trend, a little bit more non-transports from our fast squad, but 69 is the exact same number. The year before,
it looks like it's gonna be trending.
and then this is just our monthly call volume that he was talking about, and we've been averaging about 4 calls a month more this year than last year.
So we'll be trending somewhere around 400 for this year. which would have been what the higher years back in like 2018, 2019,
It's gonna have,
pushing 400 calls a year.
Right.
and could we pull that back a couple of years too, get that data?
I'm sure she probably can.
Yeah, I think that's good to see.
You get skewed
With the
from 2019,
Yeah.
probably 20 more, but 2019 through, the numbers really get skewed.
Yeah,
And I think when you're trying to do averages and stuff, I think we need to leave those years out. So we could pull back a few more years, but I think you're gonna get bad data.
We had
So I can tell you from doing the data for when we did the, changeovers 2018, we did the changeover to the new billing company. I gathered all the same data for that.
Mhm.
And we were floating right around 400 calls. And, it was the call, the call volume split was pretty equal equal now to what they're doing. The transport versus non-transport, I don't remember, but we were floating in that, each year between that 360 to 400 calls. A heavy year was like 415. I think there was one year that was like 415, 420.
we had like a frequent flyer that was really abusing the system. So then that person that you're not transporting, that was
Yeah.
really skewing the numbers. It's like, wow, that's horrible. You know,
that's a pretty tight range though, 360 to 410. That's,
It's been consistent for probably the last pre,
Well, that's right.
2018 with COVID, and then we're back into
35
it.
calls a month, so you're talking 4 to 5 call a month fluctuation.
right, right. We know our population is not growing dramatically. So there's no reason to believe the next 5 years, we're gonna see a big,
Well, I wouldn't say big, but I think you're gonna see a start, if you follow the age data.
Yeah.
Like, what super surprised me about seeing that age data, which like really hung out to me there, was we have more people the age 70 to 74 in town than 5 years old and under. Like, that's, so if our average, clientele, let's say for an ambulance is 62 years old. And every year where our numbers are skewing a little bit more to older population, I think. I don't think we'll see a huge
Yeah.
increase, let's say in the next 5 years,
Yeah,
but let's
yeah.
say another 5%. So, maybe in the next 5 years, we'll be floating in that 420, right, 400 to 420 instead of 360 to 400.
yeah.
I think you're talking a good 10 to 15 years until you're.
Yeah.
Possibly floating at 500.
Mhm.
And again, this is all speculation.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think if you're looking at that 600 mark that we're saying, we're not,
exactly.
it's
where I was
probably
going.
not in our forecast.
Yeah,
No, you're probably a decade or so away.
yeah,
But it's a good mark to have on the calendar, a good mark to have as whoever's responsible for watching that data and doing that, to be able to come back to the town and be like, hey, remember that goal, that marker that we set? We're at 5, we're at 2 years, the 550s. Maybe we're 5 years into that. That's what we.
And it would definitely make it, I'll say, a help to future committees or future people on this committee 10 years from now, when they're getting closer to that, being able to turn on exactly like you said, and kind of plant the seed that, hey, 10 to 15 years from now, we're probably gonna be approaching this number. Part of what we do, we can plant that seed in the population now. Great, we got the new building, we got good equipment, we got good people now, we need to get more good people, but no, we're not looking to hire staffing for at least for EMS and fire. Until we get this number, which looks like we might 10 to 15 years, get close to that. Our
that's out there right now.
followers.
Yeah.
That's all over.
Yeah.
Oh, you just wanna hire people, you just wanna hire people.
No, so I think we're starting to get enough data that we could, I'll say, lump that in with our recommendations. No, we're not seeing a need for it now. But
Your high water mark.
yeah, exactly. Our high water mark of, okay, we need to start looking at it, would be it at that point. So monthly call volume, me looking at this, something else that someone had mentioned, was the possibility of, okay, not hiring staffing and having to do benefits and retirement and all the extra financial stuff that comes with that. But would we benefit from seasonal staffing? instead of turning around and having, Lebanon come in our busier times all the time during the day, would we benefit over the summer? You know, the question that was posed was, are we significantly busier in the summertime where if we went and offered to hire part-time EMTs or per diem EMTs to be like, hey, you know, come and staff an ambulance from 6 a to 6 p, Monday to Friday, to handle our busier times during June, July, and August, or whatever. Me looking at the data here, I would read that as, okay, maybe we are a little bit up. In April, May, June, there's an upswing, which to me would make sense. That's as everyone's unpacking their jet skis and getting back on the water and excited about doing summertime activities, and thereby having realizing that they're not able to do maybe quite as much as they could the year before, and getting injured in doing so. And then you see the exact same thing again. Specifically, you know, I would read that as November and December in the winter season. People are breaking out all their wintertime activities and trying to jump back into it and realizing it. Yeah, I don't have the balance I had a year ago, and getting hurt, or
I
you've
would
got the
venture to
first
say that
snow
they're-
of the season and causing accidents.
I
Never
venture to
forgot
say
how to
that
drive.
a lot of those are those, at least that November, December timeframe, are mental health calls.
Okay,
We get a rash of those certain times of years where we're transporting for mental health issues.
okay.
So I look at this data, I don't see a lot of seasonality at all. I think
No.
it's,
I think. if
I don't think
you
enough
look
to
at the
warrant,
left-
kind of muddy the waters with Lebanon.
Yeah.
Hey, you're,
Yeah.
I
They're not
think if
gonna
you
like
look
it.
to the left, I mean, the chart makes it look like it, but when you look left, it's just a few calls.
right,
Right.
it's a little small.
Five calls,
number.
right.
Right. Yeah. you're right.
5 call difference month to month.
We talked about this at one other point, the population change in the summer is 1,000 people or so.
It's
Yeah, I
about
think-
2,500.
yeah, but I've steadily said it's 2,500. I think, you know, our population is floating somewhere around 7,000 when we're, and you're busy.
That's kind of remarkable that the call volume doesn't go up much then.
Well, it's funny, the funny is that we get very few calls about like jet ski accidents and.
I know, but just
railback and-
more
yeah,
people
so
here,
we-
right? So more people
absolutely.
that cut their finger while they're slicing tomatoes or whatever.
Yeah.
You just think that
You're
would,
looking at 2,000 a month.
yeah,
Yep.
Not a lot, but
yeah,
No, when you get that kind of influx, though, you expect a
yeah,
spike.
just some
You know, July and August, I would expect it to
some
be,
increase, yeah.
you know, you
Yeah.
can't drive around the lake and not have a summer house open.
Yeah.
Those July and August, right? Especially now with the Airbnbs and the other things, so.
So just that was one thing that we had, one of the, we'll say bullet points that we had asked about. And the data is showing that no, that's not something that we really need to look into, at least at this point. You know, maybe as we're approaching, that's something that could be revisited 8 to 10 years from now, as we're approaching that 600 number and we're starting to talk about hiring staff, maybe at that point, as a stopgap, would be hiring some seasonal people or whatnot, or doing a seasonal duty crew that you're being paid for or something. But at this point, my thought is that it's not. As
I
the
think
chief
the
said,
recommendation could easily be just to continue tracking and watching the numbers.
yeah. Right. Listen, what else we got numbers wise there? Is that all?
That's really about it.
Okay. Check numbers. All right, does anyone have, based on what we've chatted about so far, anyone have any thoughts, ideas, anything that we need to revisit from other meetings pertaining to numbers? Anyone have any numbers that you want that we don't have yet?
I will say I dropped the ball. Phil got me a whole bunch of fire call numbers. I will get those to you guys. They're laying on my desk right now. I meant to bring them. Okay.
Anything major, remarkable that stands out?
I don't think anything remarkable. And I think the same as the EMS, that it's cyclical cycles. We're up 25% this year, but looking through that information that I got, Ed, I cannot put my finger on to anything in particular, other than I think the fire department is being called more and more for everything.
Yeah, we've been calling you more for lift assist.
Well, you know, whether it's lift assist or the smoke detectors, and we've tried to educate and we continue to try to educate, but people don't understand that,
Change your batteries.
you know, that you have a battery and it's plugged in and, you know, they get old and you gotta change them and I think we may be coming into that 10-year cycle, and that may be some of where we're at. So we're pushing some more education on that. But
Information to add to the website.
nothing, and, you know, I'm seeing nothing that sticks out, that stands out, that says, ooh, this is a problem, or it's gonna continue to be a problem, or it's gonna increase.
So I'd like to see some more national numbers. I think start with the police chief has been pretty good about saying, look, we got 7 people. Here's what we do. Here's why we don't need 8. And if we look at some national numbers in your head, it's like when you add another 1,000 people to the population, that's probably time to add some more officers. I'd like to go support him with some national numbers, national data. So it's
I can
not,
give you the national data, but
I was
it's gonna
gonna
tell you we're supposed to be at 9 officers.
then that's worthwhile looking
Yeah.
at. So we can give people a heads up that, hey, we're actually operating pretty lean here. And we're not saying we need more, we're saying we're good, but
I
we're,
might
you
use the
know,
word efficient.
we're efficient.
Yeah.
But
Roy's really with his
it's important
numbers.
for people to know, because you'll get some people in town saying, why can't we get away with 6? We got 6 last year. We had that guy out and we did pretty good.
Mm.
And we need to have your back on that, I think. And as a committee, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, being able to turn around to people, you know, when they're griping about numbers, budgets, whatever like that. You're like, hey, you know, if we went by what everyone else is doing, what the recommendations are, we'd have another 2 or 3 officers, but our police department is effective and efficient enough that they're saving us money, and they're great enough that they're making everything that we need happen at 7.
Yeah, heads up, if our chief decides to go out to pasture in a year or 2 and do something fun, funner, more fun, and we get a new chief, he or she might come in here and say, I need 10.
Yeah.
And the national numbers will say, he or she might not be far off.
Yeah.
So.
So similar to
Part
planting
of
the
my,
seed.
my job, I think, is to help educate the select board as to where we're at versus.
It's easy enough. I have it. 'Cause
Yeah.
like I said, we did this when we did the first strategic plan. It was part of our kind of pay overview of this is the department. This is what the FBI's, you know, recommendation or criminal the National Criminal Justice, I can't think of the name, whatever they are,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, they're the ones that recommendation, you know, make all the recommendations. They're like, you should have 1 officer per 500 residents or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, so us being at, you know, 4,500 to 5,000, we should be at like 9 point something officers. So technically like 9.2 officers like that. So technically we should have 9 officers, but I can't with a straight face say to our residents, like,
Yeah, that's good.
shove out another $250,000 for
No,
for
that's-
2 more officers. You know?
I think we should recognize that. Same with fire, same with EMS as well. I mean, if there are comparisons that we have to the state or to the nation, and shows where we're at, I think that's helpful.
I think we need to look at population growth that's projected. We've got a big project that looks like it's gonna go through up the top of the hill. That's gonna bring in 80,000 people. And what's that gonna do? Once it opens its doors, it's kind of an influx, it's a rush.
Go 50-50.
Population, what's that do to your, it's probably less than 50. What's it do to Phil's fire reporter?
Yeah, we've had that discussion. First off, it's a long way from possibly being built. It's not. I don't even want to call it probable yet, possible.
Oh, but there are a number of projects that are in the pipeline, kind of like not as big as that.
A bunch of little, but yeah, looking at the 300,000 we've talked about in this meeting and in others, that it's gonna take almost no impact on police. Almost no impact on fire, and we're estimating 1 to 2 calls a month
For EMS
for
increase
EMS,
rates.
maybe.
So you're thinking that's gonna be a younger population?
Maybe, I don't think it's
It's-
gonna be that much.
Yeah, it's geared towards that, so if we're talking about, Laramie Farms, it's geared towards the Dartmouth College, Dartmouth Hospital.
Right, but that'll skew the numbers we're just looking at is that with the senior population growing, all of a sudden it's gonna drop. That's gonna change everybody's interpretation of what's happening. So we need to be prepared for that.
Sure.
And how do we present that back to the community?
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's not just Laramie Farms, but what if 3 Laramie Farms happen? We can't just keep saying, oh, it's not gonna be an impact on the fire, it's not gonna be an impact on police. It is, it might not be such an impact with this one project that we have to do something different, but if 3 of those things happen, we need people to be aware that there will be a cost to that.
And we also support Canaan. Not doing some fire backup if they need.
We do, yep.
Yeah, through mutual aid.
EMS, not, EMS is not as much.
But if they put a big project in right near us on this side of Canaan, we're gonna get the impact of that without any revenue. So we gotta make sure we're watching what the population growth looks like and what it's like. Yeah, to be able to be on top of the situation. And these are great numbers, but I think we need to look at the what ifs too.
I agree. Let's see. What else is on our list?
I guess, just thinking quickly here,
Good.
the what if, I think, can be a little dangerous in new construction. Because you're talking about buildings that have every service in them, detective, sprinklers, well-built, good construction. If we were building old Victorians and we were gonna have 340 old Victorians built, I'd say we're gonna have an impact or more of an impact. We're talking buildings that are, and I'm not gonna, I'll say it, but not fireproof, I understand that completely, but being built to today's standards, it's totally different than our old housing market.
Well, but along the lines, and I don't disagree, but along the lines what he was talking about, like, so we've come up with a high water mark of 600 and something calls, med calls, right?
Mhm.
Well, okay, let's develop a high water mark for how many calls for service in law enforcement, for police that we're dealing with, that we need to start looking at that in an full time, right? I think that's kind of same watermark, right? Whether it's I would go less population control. We can throw a number out there, like about 1,000 people, sure, that's probably good. But really, what I can look at is say, okay, right now, we're averaging 9,000 calls per service per year, right? That means that, each officer is handling 1,200 calls per service per year. And these are just, arbitrary numbers, right? And if we hit, but if we start looking at it like, okay, but if we hit, 12 to 14,000 calls per service, boy, those 5 patrol officers, they're out straight. So
That's a typical.
that's the tipping point. We need to start talking about adding an 8th full timer, patrol, something like that. I think that would be, because like I said, and I can give, and I'm happy to provide it, right? The national statistics of what the federal government says that, hey, if you want to be, hometown USA, you should have, 1 officer per, X amount of residents and this and that. But I think the reality is, especially around here, people go, yeah, the federal government, when was the last time they lived in a small town? But if we said, okay, historically, we go back to, we've been at 7 officers since, 2003. That's when we went to the 7th officer. Since 2003 to now, right, this has been our average calls for services per year. If we start breaking that down, right, that's X amount of calls per road officer, right? Because obviously we have administrative this and that. If we hit this many calls for service, we believe that that's gonna impact the service that our residents are getting, right? So if
Quality of service.
quality of service, if each officer is handling, 1,500 calls for service a year now, and we all, I think we, at least everything, the feedback I get right now is people in Enfield and a majority are happy with the quality of service they get from the law enforcement, right? We can go to unlocks. We do, those little things like VIN checks and stuff like that. But we start getting stretched out to where we're averaging 1,800 calls for service per year for an officer. Boy, our time is a lot more limited to being able to do those community service types of things. We need to start exploring adding an officer so that they can share that load of calls for service.
We can show the trends too over the last 7 or 8 years, boom, 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 and based on, and I know it's gonna be variable, it's not a straight line, but,
Right.
and if we project out,
Oh, I think it's actually gonna be this.
Yeah.
COVID,
yep,
and then
yep.
back up.
So the only other thing I'd say, Phil, about, Larrabee Farm, like housing, is currently, that's not the only thing we're looking at. The planning board is looking at changing zoning rules. So there'll be a lot more of alternative housing. And for instance, they're looking at R5 and allowing duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes. And I'm not a builder, and I would suspect they probably won't be the same level of fireproof as like a Laramie Farms. So I think we need to be aware.
No, I think we need to be aware of, I'm not disagreeing with that, Dan. I think the other thing that Enfield has had and continues to have is a building department that is on top of
Yep.
those duplexes, single families on, okay, which I think makes a big difference. And I say that from living in another adjoining town where there is not that level and differences in the construction is visible.
Yeah.
So that said, I still feel comfortable. And I think on the fire side that we have some other mechanisms that, let's just say Laramie Farms again gets built and we're there for fire alarm after fire alarm after fire alarm. Something wrong with the system. We have mechanism to make the owners make that system correct, okay? So we can control some of that. I mean, even to the point that if we, the select board can set, okay, after 5 calls, you're getting charged $200 a call. For false alarms because it's their fault. They are not taking care of their systems. Now, if everybody that moves into Laramie Farms burns food every night and, I don't know what the answer is to that, but.
Is there an NFPA or one of those kind of standards that talks about like X amount of structures per square, per square mile?
Everything based
Population
on
density.
population and run like
So
So I can tell you like,
full response time.
so when I did the, again, I ended up collecting data, so I did a grant, a couple years ago for a USDA, grant that we put in for, and so I can tell you where the population density of Enfield is and stuff like that. Would, again, tracking something like that continue to monitor and track population density in certain areas in Enfield help in the future?
I think it most
Judge,
certainly
what kind of
would,
coverage
because
would
if we started seeing increase in population density and I'm gonna say George Hill and Grafton Pond and Potato Road, if we started seeing those quadplexes and so forth, it's gonna be reflected in response time. There's no doubt about it. So I think, yes, those do have to be watched,
I
but
think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the tipping point number is gonna be a lot harder to fire.
that's what I was just about to.
I think-
The question I was just gonna pose, it sounds like EMS is relatively, I'll say, easy, calls per year. Once we hit a certain number of calls per year or calls per day, we have, I'll say, a number, an easy number that we can be like, okay, this is where it's, makes sense for us to start to try to bring some in-house staff.
Just running number wise.
And then
And
I think
for
the same thing.
PD, it seems like that number is
We're
going to
gonna-
be based off of how many calls per service per officer.
Right.
How many calls per service per year can each officer handle and still be able to do all of the community policing benefits that we appreciate.
I wonder if
Here
it's
in
about
town.
the same.
Once they hit, so if they're doing 1,500 calls per year each right now, and we're able to do
It's
that,
close.
okay, once they hit 750 or 1,750, is that the tipping point where, okay, we're starting to have to cut back on our community policing activities because our call volume's getting higher. All right, so maybe 1,750 might be the tipping point to be like, yes, now we need to add that 8th officer or whatnot, so that we can continue to do everything that we appreciate here in town.
Right.
So my question would be, what is that number for fire?
Let's do police real fast. Is that something you think you could put together?
Yep.
Reasonably sell to the committee and.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or something. Here's
Yeah,
what
I'll
I
have it
think
for the next
that
meeting.
would be.
I'll pull not just our statistics, but like what is the, what does the National Criminal Justice say, like calls for service per town? I'll get stuff from other towns, but like, hey, that are 8 officers and 9 officers and 6 officers and 5 officers, like what are your calls for service? What are you handling? Do you, like, I know for a fact that Lebanon, right, they're 40 officers, when they hit a certain call for service number several years back, they cut out all their community policing stuff, like they don't do motor vehicle unlocks, they don't do VIN checks, they don't do, because they just don't have time. But
Right.
their community doesn't want to add the numbers to the long run, so you gotta cut through. Anyway, yes, I can, it's a long way of saying, yes, I'll prepare it.
So with that. I don't know where to do the research. We could try to do a
Right.
little research on fire,
So,
or we can set some
What-
number. I think there's gonna be a lot more variables, you know.
Well, and I
Who's
think
responding,
there's
how many
gonna be a
people are
lot
responding,
more,
What's our response time? But I think we could probably find a way to set a number that, let's revisit this when we hit. We're at 300-ish calls when we hit 600 calls, but we need to caveat that with,
well, I think there's 2 things that we need to caveat it. One is the number of personnel.
Okay.
Okay, because 600 calls with half the staff that we have right now isn't gonna do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that has to be rolled into it.
okay,
But when we do a comparison, I think that we need to be cognizant of, because there are a number of towns out there that want to become full-time. So their numbers get skewed. And I'm saying this and trying to be as nice as I can about it, but if we wanna, I can pad the numbers, okay? I'm not gonna pad the numbers because we're gonna play the game fairly. But every time there's an EMS call, I can make that a fire call as well. Every time that, there's a car off the side of the road and the officer says, no issue, no need, I can still make that a call. And we're not going to do that, but I think that we need to be aware of other localities that are doing that and skewing their numbers because they're trying to.
What about, because we're talking about the community here, right? We're not, this isn't necessarily, what does, some books say we should have for ambulance coverage, or what some books say that we should have, right? Because I could, NFPA is 8 minutes, right, for
Is average.
is average for a fire call, right? We know that with a on-call or volunteer, fire department, 8 minutes is just not happening, right? NFPA comes up with that because, New York City has a full-time staff that comes on this and that. But what if we came up with a measuring stick of what we believe that the Enfield community is good with a response time for a on-call staff thing? And then we don't set a specific goal, but we monitor that for the next 3 to 5 years and say, hey, so over the last 3 to 5 years, For the last 3 to 5 years, our average response time is this. Going forward, our average response, and then, okay, 3 years later, it's this. And then we can start measuring, that's where you can, that's a measuring stick to what does the community want? Well, if you want an 8-minute response time,
It's a different one.
you gotta have
Yeah.
there's a different look here. You gotta, that. But if you're okay with, and obviously we'd have to break it down to the town, right? If you're in downtown Enfield, the response time, let's say is, the average response time, the first call in is 14 minutes, right? But if you're out on Grafton Pond Road, right, it's gonna be closer to 15 to 18 minutes, you know what I mean? But I think as maybe as a committee or whatever, you can kind of come up with a measuring stick at first and move forward, because there isn't one there now, right?
Well,
other
I
than
think,
some
I think that we've
NFPA.
established some measuring stick. And that is 2 years ago, the town of Enfield Fire Department did not respond to 16 fire calls. That means that nobody in the town of Enfield went. Simple. That's a fact. The last 2 years, last year, we had one call where we didn't have any response. This year to date, we have had 0 calls where there's been no response. So again, I think it goes back to the personnel and the staffing and how we get more people involved and getting that commitment rather than a number. And I don't know.
But there's always ways, even with the EMS, to skew numbers, response times.
Sure.
Is hold the tone, tell them dispatch, hey, I'm on, hold the tone. So you're not clicking that meter,
Yep.
Or I'm on and responding when in reality, your partner is like 3 minutes out. There's ways to kind of skew numbers. I don't do it. I just let them tone away. I can see the person on Active 911, they're coming. Most of my people are on Snapchat, so I can actually see where they are and they can see where I am. So I'll flip over to Snapchat and click on maps and I can see them coming
Yeah.
too, so. Yeah.
I gotta take off. I'm gonna ruin your quorum, I think.
Well, we can be quick. Fire, I just looked it up and they had a whole list of things to be looking at, and it's the same thing we're talking about. Increase in call volume, extended response times, declining volunteer numbers. And then they had some community stuff. Increasing diversity of call types was one, and that may be something to look at. How many of these calls are false alarms and how many are active engaged calls that.
Well, and in that information that I gave you, that breaks it down for the last year for how many are false, how many is public service.
Okay.
And times of days of
And then it's community growth stuff, all the stuff we've been talking about, but I think really it'll be harder to put like a number on there, but I think we can highlight those
challenge.
things. We should be looking at how many calls we're actually making and missing. How many volunteers do we have on the books, those types of things. And then what level of service, what is our response time? What do you want it to be?
Could we, next time we meet will be October, and we're talking about delivering this presentation in November. Can we start to put together a draft of that presentation, and that might start to identify where the holes are, for us?
Well, I think we got some good work done today.
It sounds like, coming into this meeting, you guys got some good data and stuff.
Yeah. When I had a thought, it just floated away.
You're not alone.
Regular, it's almost above the median.
I was happens to me, say this table, motion table is close to the meeting.
I think I wish I could the next meeting with those numbers, start to really refine those parts of recommendations. I think we add to that agenda to revisit the talk of public safety department.
That's what it was. We're talking about, and it sounds like the police department is on board, or has talked to his people about cross-training, whether it's, and he's got a couple of examples of people that are doing it already, whether it's cross-training with EMS or cross-training with fire.
They're on fire too.
Is there a possibility, and just in the essence of transparency,
Emily and Kayla both on fire too,
Yeah, awesome.
in
So
Austin.
in the essence of transparency for your current membership, what would you guys think, and everyone else, of course, about before we have a meeting with, say, an open forum with anyone in the town, having a meeting with both your memberships and just getting, hey, we've heard rumors that some people want to do some cross training. We've heard rumors, we're trying to help you guys out. What do from your membership, just so that way, they don't feel like they're being forced to do anything.
I
They
think
can
so they don't
provide
feel like
their
they're left
input.
out.
Yeah.
We don't want them to feel left out. And can we start with having a meeting with them?
I
Since
told them
this is
some of
all-
the stuff,
Uh-huh.
but I haven't told them everything because.
But I think from my perspective, coming from the committee is much more upfront,
Right.
much more than I can preach all day long.
So that was something else that Ed and I mentioned yesterday is like, crap, should we be doing this already? Getting them involved since everything we're talking about affects them. Roy's, yes, clearly been talking to his personnel and you guys, I'm sure, are talking to your personnel. But one person talking to 5 that are full-time employees that he sees all the time compared to one person talking to 15 to 20 in both of your cases. And you see everyone 10 to 15.
Oh, my.
You see them once a month, everyone, maybe. Having them and hear them getting to hear it and talk to us directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. At least it would just get their better.
Well, and I
buy-in,
think
trust.
that it would be good too for them to hear that, full-time is out there a ways, because I can say that to them, no, this isn't talking about full-time within the foreseeable future, but I think there's some that feel that this is pushing the
And
volunteer,
then-
pushing it all.
Go ahead. And then this, to me also would be, like right now, we are a group of 6, 29, 11 people that live in town trying to dispel rumors when we hear them. If we meet with your both respective memberships, now that quadruples the number of us that are out there with the firsthand facts and information, that when we hear rumors, they can assist us with that.
Well, that's how you get buy-in, if
Correct,
they know what's going on.
correct.
I think it's a great idea, but I think we need to be careful, that we are still in the development stage of recommendations to the select board.
Right,
So
right.
anything that we say in these meetings
Mhm.
is just some thinking that we have and we want to get some input.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to get out ahead.
See, and that's what we talked about yesterday. I think it really needs to be crafted well, and I think it needs to be a lot more, what do you guys see happening?
Yeah, asking that question.
Not, here's what we're thinking about doing. What do you see? We've had a lot of discussions in different directions.
Yeah.
How can you
What do you
guys,
see the future?
yeah, what do you see in the future? How do you see it work? We can have some questions that we're gonna spawn some discussion.
Yeah.
We've
No,
talked about the public safety concept, but, all 3 departments working under like one administrator. What do you think of that? Let's talk and see what people say, you guys will get good feedback that way,
And
but,
then in November, going to the select board saying, we heard from
well, and I wanted to
these different
put that,
groups.
if there's not a 2025 budget implication, which is starting to sound like there's not going to be anything that we're gonna say, let's try to do this year. We can extend that timeline.
Oh, good.
So
I didn't know those.
I don't wanna rush through it,
Yeah.
but it might just be a quick either report or even a verbal report to them that, we've been going through it, here's what we're working on. We were kind of trying to do this that way. If there was a 2025 budget implication, we do that. We want to slow down and make sure we get a good thorough report. So we'll come back to you in a few months when we're done.
Oh, we're in good shape right now.
Yeah, I mean, we were trying to push this forward going, if there's something that needs to be added or changed in the budget, let's try to get it there.
But if there's nothing major that we
I
need to
think there's
do, then
nothing
just
major
reporting
that
back to
you're
the
not
select
hearing
board that,
anything that's like, ooh, we should probably budget that.
hey, you know, we're good for right now, or, yeah. We want more, we're gonna take more time to delve into this better and come up with better, more thorough, long-term recommendations and benchmarks for, okay, once
Well, the
theoretically this committee is dispelled, that way the select board or the town manager has numbers and stuff that we came up with, that, hey, these are what we're watching. Once we get close to these, that then we need to start thinking about this.
So I think that's a wonderful idea, and it sounds like we're all in line with that, but by the same token, I still think having a draft final presentation would help focus us a bit.
Okay.
And move us.
And I think we need to make sure that we put up front that it doesn't appear that we're looking at any economic impact immediately.
Correct.
I mean, that's gotta be right out front. Because otherwise they're gonna, with this whole presentation, they're gonna sit there and say,
What's the cost of
what
it?
is it gonna cost us to do this, you know? But the design is that we think the first year or two, it's gonna have minimal or no impact on the budget.
Yeah, the only budget impacts would be with the items that the chiefs are already working on, whether it's just to, cost of living increases, increasing the call pay, that kind of stuff that you guys are already working on, that, you know.
The
that's
only
not
one I'd
things
say
that we're
we haven't,
impacting.
and I'm throwing this out there, not having this conversation with that yet, which I usually don't do, but like, we haven't talked about potentially budgeting like a stipend type thing for if we were gonna move forward with the EMS style thing, but that's a conversation that we can.
But that's not-
And even that, there's,
It's not a significant budget impact, right? If
and
we
that,
look
we're
at
talking about, we'd be talking about $10,000 to $12,000 total.
total.
Plus,
Also talking period
plus
of time down the
1,200 to-
road before that would be happening, because it's not just somebody applying, they're having to train.
Oh, it's,
Yeah,
well, I
cost
think, I think that
for
impact would
training
be,
And everything.
at the total of 12 grand probably wouldn't be that first year, but this first right away, if we looked at it and implemented this, it would be this year.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying the
So-
cost of.
right, we're not talking about needing $100,000 in the budget. We're talking about needing $10,000 in the
10 to
budget,
15.
10 to 15.
Yeah.
Because you've
Cost
got
of
7
training.
officers that, one of which already is an EMT.
Right.
So that's 6 officers. EMT class is $1,200 to $1,500 per person.
Yeah, you'd only send one or two, you're not gonna send a whole force.
Depends how aggressive we want to get with this. I've talked with, the group that does the EMT training, and they really like the idea, and they're willing to come and just train the PD as a group, you know what I mean? So do, like, 'cause apparently now you do like 90% of it online,
Yeah.
and
they're
then
all-
you do a field day once every other week or something like
Once
that.
every other week. doing
And they'll come, and they'll actually,
Practical, and
they like the idea so much, they're hoping to build off of it, that they're willing to come and do their practicals at our PD on like a Tuesday and stuff instead of a Saturday, so that we can minimally impact my budget.
So I am all for this idea. I think it's good. I really do. Having said that, however, there are members of the budget committee who rightfully are very, very frugal and look at every dime we spend as a town. We want to be careful going in saying we need another 10 or 15,000. We need to show them the savings that we'll get by not responding, not having Lebanon respond to those
Or the
community
community
traffic
benefit.
calls. Yeah, so we need to show them.
Yeah, just, that's good for sure.
Yeah. Okay. That. What else do we have? Does anyone else have anything? They want to discuss?
So we just
Chat
got
about real
sidebar
quick?
that we have to make sure we include the cost of the EMT training.
Right,
Because we currently do not pay our people their time to take it. And I'll
so,
never have.
Right.
We will pay for the class.
We just have to pay attention to that. It's part of it.
Yeah, right.
I don't know who you're talking to about potential for training and whatnot. But I know over at the hospital, we now have an EMT program that is similarly flexible, very focused. And what we're working on over there at the hospital is Because historically EMT programs are very hour-based, where you need X number of hours of training in this, X number of hours of training in that, and X number of hours of training in this. From what we're being told, we are the first ones in the state to be doing a competency-based EMT program.
Oh, yeah.
So
Good.
instead of having to do
Very good.
X number of hours, you come in at the start and we evaluate everyone. And be like, okay, for whatever reason, this group really knows their cardiology. Great, let's do a sign off on cardiology, or let's do a sign off on mega codes, or whatever the case may be. And we can cast that, that's done. Let's move on to something else that we do need to spend some more time with. And so people with your background, whether it's learning from experiences, whether it's learning from extra, like
Good idea.
CCCC training or something like that, bleeding control. I'm sure your officers are well versed in bleeding control.
Right.
So wouldn't have to spend as much time on that. So right now we've got one class that we're putting through with nurses and respiratory therapists that are our guinea pigs.
Yep.
And then we've got a second one that's going through at the end of the year.
Oh.
So that's
So we want some
something else
officers
that
to
we
let me
can
know.
take a look.
Let me ask who's starting or writing this draft?
Right now, I just started a list of bulleted items that
You're gonna build
we are
a
potentially.
PowerPoint? Is that the goal?
Yeah, like right now, I'm just started, advisory committee recommendations, or suggestions. So, and I'm just writing things down, like so far, it seems like one topic is cross-training officers and town employees for the other branches, so to speak, of emergency services, and then financially incentivizing their response both on and off duty. I've continued tracking numbers for seasonal staffing, nothing recommended at this time. And then develop high water marks or for each specialty. EMS, it sounds like
So if you want
6 to
put that
50, and then for 650 total calls per year, whereas PD sounds like it might be more of how many calls per year per officer. And then fire department, we have no idea. But
Well,
develop some
Phil,
metric
wouldn't
for
it
that
be-
as well.
Like fire EMS, more bang for the buck, they do both.
Well, I
mean,
think,
we've never sat down and talked about that, but,
I mean, once EMS reached your trigger point of 6 or 650 or whatever, I think that would be the natural time that
they
then
do both.
EMS would be fire as well.
Yeah.
Because if you got full-time people,
Right.
you gotta use them
Yeah.
full-time as you can.
Yeah, you only polish a truck so much.
Well,
So the metric may be, I think that's something that we need to think
You know
about
about that,
for the
yeah.
next meeting. Is what number, so EMS, we've got some type of number, PD, we've got some type of number. What number are we looking at for fire? But that number might be whatever EMS's is. And once we get to the tipping point with EMS, that be the time that, okay, well, if we're bringing people in-house and with the number of responding to 1.75 or 2 calls per day, what are they doing the rest of the day? So it might make sense, instead of hiring them just for EMS, hiring them for fire EMS and having them technically covering both. And then at least you get a fire driver out of it, or hiring, let's say, having 3 on staff instead of just 2. That way you've got 2 for the ambulance and 1 that at least is a driver to get a truck on the road.
Well, wouldn't you still
What
want,
What were you envisioning as a draft? I mean, we need to wrap this meeting up.
Yeah, we do.
But what were you envisioning as a draft so we can start to put something together? That's all I was asking, was who's gonna put
Yeah.
it together? Because I don't know that I have time to do it. So
Okay. So what I was envisioning for a draft is something simple that you would present to the board of directors. And it would start out with, here was the mission of this task force, this advisory committee. And here's the analysis we did, and you break it down by department. I think it'd be easier than trying to so start with police. Here's what we looked at, here's what they're doing now, here's what the national, you know, numbers suggest they should be, number of officers we should have, et cetera, et cetera. Based on that, here's the tipping point where we think things might need to change, we might need to bring in another officer. Here's the recommendations, et cetera. And then go to fire and then go to EMS and make sure at the end of the day, the final page is, here's our recommendation to the select board. No changes, no major changes needed at this time. However, on the edges, there's some things we can do to be more efficient, including getting EMT certification for all police officers. Whatever we come up with, those fine tuning ones, and then heads up, in the next 5 to 10 years, here are some major changes that could need to happen, and here are the tipping points associated with those.
Do you guys have your stuff in PowerPoint or written up that you presented?
Yeah, and the data that I'll gather based off this, I'll put
But
it
that
out.
we originally,
Yeah, all three of them.
Because if we're starting with where we're at, that's what you presented. So we can probably just pull that into a document.
Combine the three of them.
Maybe some additional fine tuning things we've discussed, like Chief hasn't
Well, I think
shown
that
the national
initial
numbers
draft,
yet.
like you said, we just pull it all together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then we can start, let's tweak this section a little, let's tweak that section a
Yeah.
little.
yeah.
Alright, so if you guys can get there, you can put a bullet list of kind of where we're headed in recommendation.
Okay.
Get that to me, I should be able to merge it into some sort of document and then we can start whittling away at it.
I'd be happy to help if you look for some assistance with that too.
You're familiar with PowerPoint? And you're good with PowerPoint?
I can do black and white, PowerPoint, sure, no fancy pictures and stuff, but.
Well, I would say even
Like a little crayon picture.
at this
Bullet points.
At this point, it might almost be best, like you said, to do almost an outline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
that's right.
actually PowerPoint slides, but let's just put it in outline format, then we can quickly shift it into a PowerPoint if we wanted to.
well, and again, it's not having a budget effect, so it hasn't got to move as quickly, hasn't got to be
Right.
completed.
So yes, ultimately, I'm all on board with your suggestion of yes, ultimately, let's start to work on developing our final presentation and putting stuff into that. So it's not one big project at the end. But in the meantime, I do think we need to put together just kind of like a smaller statement that we can give just as an update, so to speak, to the select board, to the budget committee, to be like, hey, at this point, you know, from our discussions, from our research, from the data that we've been provided, we do not feel at this point that there is a large financial impact or any major immediate changes that need to occur sooner rather than later. Or for this budget system or budget cycle. And that we're going to continue to develop more in-depth recommendations and a longer term plan with benchmarks that the town needs to keep watching.
I think you're getting a little too detailed for the initial response.
Okay,
I think you want, a matter of fact, when you put that in the first select board meetings.
that's fine. First couple sentences, I know I'm long-winded, so.
No,
But you also got to remember too, that the select board meetings are open to the public, so then there's people that listen to it afterwards, and they just need to hear that there's no impact that, hey, that's
They'll take their little kernel that they.
So
bought.
that-
yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
No good info.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Concise.
Concise.
Concisely,
And
one
bullet points
paragraph.
is probably, yeah, board presentations need to be bullet pointed and just. Boom, 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 boom. And then do you have any questions? And where the hell out of here?
Okay,
You've done this before.
We like speed and call and help.
Good for him, because he comes to the meetings anyway.
there you go.
I like that.
Do you have a quick question?
I think that's good.
We're done, we're adjourned.
Adjourn.
Second,
Second.
thank you.
Okay.
What, 17:06. Random question for you. Promise my neighbor it is next time I saw you.
Thank you.
What is the procedure for getting a burn permit?